Welcome to the Adult Table, a podcast where we sit down with people in the SASE and our STEM community. We set the virtual table to bring in a diverse set of guests to engage in a casual conversation on their professional career and life.
With this podcast, we hope that we can bridge the gap between the hierarchy involved with growing up. We can redefine what it means to be able to figuratively sit at the adult table.
I'm one of your co-hosts, Jason Chin.
And I'm your other co-host, Jenny Chung.
Today, we have Larry Chan joining us at the adult table. So, Larry, thanks again for coming on. Do you want to just give the listeners a brief introduction of yourself and your pronouns?
Absolutely. So, Jason, Jen, I am so honored to be invited to the adult table. So, my name is Larry Chan. I use pronouns he, him, his, just to get something out of the way, right? So, question is, if I'm being invited to the adult table to kind of have a conversation to help folks kind of bridge that divide, does that mean that you have to consider me an adult? Because
Yes.
if yes, then I'll play along for a little bit, but that's usually how I prefer not to act like an adult. But we're gonna go along with that theme for the time that we're together. So a little bit about myself. I have close to 3 decades of service at Procter & Gamble, and I'm also happy to state that I also have about a decade of supporting SASE. I believe in SASE's mission of improving the station of Asians in life. I'm a U.S.-born citizen. Mom and dad was from Hong Kong, China. They arrived with little financial resources. I'm very thankful for where I am in career and life, given my start from scratch. And I'm always open to share my experiences with the intent of benefiting others.
Great.
And I definitely agree with the sentiment of being an adult. I think it's like exciting for us. That's kind of the theme of the podcast, but I like to always say too, in like 30 years, I still want to be like that kid at heart, not fully get into that and still be able to find the joy in a lot of other things. I think one of the things that really stood out is kind of your time in SASE. I think that's obviously why Jenny and I know you, and we've seen you kind of come to a lot of events really with that focus in mind of helping all these students out. So just to kind of begin, we were just wondering how you started off involved in SASE, how you even heard about it in the first place, and what's keeping you coming back to be a part of this org.
So again, it's really how, I had humble beginnings. So I grew up in, I like to say that my mom was 8 months pregnant with me and came here and I was born. So I like to say that I was made in Hong Kong, but born in the US. I grew up inner city, South End. So when I say inner city, South End, it's 10 minutes walking from the P&G Gillette office, right? I couldn't, so it's much gentrified now, and I could not afford to rent or buy there. But back then, it was a very inner city, mixed people of color, and it was lower income, right? So I went through, I was fortunate in that I tested well, and I tested into Boston Latin High School, and that's an exam school that can get you further along in education. I went to Northeastern University, where I met a lot of my alma mater, Bachelor of Science, Mechanical Engineering. And really, the way that my career has taken me, there are so many ways that I really need to give back to other people, right? So as we get into my career, maybe it'll become more and more evident as to kind of my background.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really cool that we're all like Northeastern alumni in this podcast right now. And I will have to say, Larry, that I think I do attribute a lot of my professional growth and leadership growth to you, because you definitely were one of the main people that always came back to SASE events to help with, career panels, resume reviews for Northeastern SASE. We'd always bring you back, and we're so happy to bring you back continuously for these things, because I definitely learned a lot from you, specifically, about one, giving back to the community for Asian Americans, like building professional growth and that sort of thing, but also for like kind of teaching us to advocate for ourselves. And from here, I kind of want to go into your professional career in how you kind of like, you said you built it from scratch, basically, right? How you moved up the chain, that sort of way, navigating the corporate world as an Asian American? Like, how was that? What was that process like, and the struggles that you felt during your whole career as of so far?
Sure. So let me get into the career that I had. So during co-ops, I was able to secure positions at military contractors. So think RCA, GE. So as a mechanical engineer, I packaged military electronics. So I worked for a company right out of college, and I worked for them for a year and a half. They didn't challenge me, nor did they go ahead and provide me stability, because the parent company pleaded guilty to fraudulent government charging. I go, okay, it's time for me to leave, right? So this is an area where being a person of color actually helps. So I got really good at job search, because it's funny, you get into job search and then you get really good, and just when you get really good, then you get hired. So I was at kind of one of these affirmative action or a affinity group career fair, and I would probably say that was an in, right? Gillette at that point in time was looking for diversity, which is quite progressive back in the late 80s for Gillette, but they did. So that I got as a benefit. I leveraged that and interviewed well. So the way that I kind of grew my 3 decades of career is, I would probably say it's individual contributor. As an individual contributor, I hired on as an R&D design engineer in Papermate, right? So I designed pens, pencil, liquid paper products. So I was an individual contributor. And there, I also took advantage of the core Asian values of education. So Gillette paid for an MBA, right? So 100%. If you got a C, you got reimbursed. Books were, oh my goodness, books 50% or they 100%? So books were covered in that. So that that is unheard of. So as I was going through and being an individual contributor, design engineer, I learned that implementation and really working in teams, collaborating, was a path that I wanted to go. And then I went into crucible roles, and that crucible role was initiative management. Initiative management is where you influence without authority. As an individual contributor, you learn mastery. You gain a skill that gains you credibility in the technical world. And then I moved into influence without authority. So I was as an initiative manager, I was entrusted with $0.4 billion. I managed $1.4 billion. And you may have seen this in some of my bios. And I took that money and I converted it with a team of engineers into processes and equipment that make Mark III Fusion and ProGlide. Those brands, each of those brands make $1 billion every year, right? So that influence without authority was a skill set that was a crucible role for me, and really helped my career. And then from there, I went into direct management. And currently in direct management, I manage design engineers that design equipment that make the blade and metal components of all the Gillette and Venus products. So it's very core to what the product is. And the director level, there's a huge element that deals with people management. So a lot of the things that I've done, the new to the world pieces of equipment, they're very exciting, but even now they've been replaced. So all those technologies will be replaced. The thing that I continue to focus in on is recruiting people, progressing people, growing people, because that's the legacy that I'm choosing to leave behind. That is much more valuable to me at this point in time than another $1 billion brand. I mean, that's part of the job, but really what actualizes me is growing people.
So what would you say is like something that would lead into being like a really productive and effective mentor? I know you mentioned a lot about really connecting with those people. And for us, like, I've had a little experience with that, just like in like our college setting, but I feel like it's a very different looking at kind of like the professional world.
I think in any mentoring situation or any opportunity where you're able to help, the absolute first thing that is crucial to being able to help is you have to care. So there's many managers who are not as successful, really given the fact that they don't care about people. That is a fatal flaw. That's like if you're a mechanical engineer and you have no calculus skills, no math skills, right? It's a fatal flaw. So any direct manager of people that does not have the care of people, that's trouble. That's a formula for a huge issue. So caring is the essence of a good mentoring relationship. And so you've seen that. Unfortunately, I meet a lot of people, I interview a lot of people to the point where, there's people who say, I know you, you interviewed me. I go, sorry, remind me your name, because I interview and meet that many people. So there is a saying that I have as I work with people in SASE. I can't hire everybody, but I can always help them with at minimum a resume review or some type of guidance. Right? I always leave something because I care, right? And that's the mentality and philosophy that I go into in engaging in all my SASE relationships. There's some folks who I'm going to really be able to go far with, those deep relationships. Obviously Procter & Gamble pays me to recruit and attract the best. I focus in on Asian representation and hiring Asians. I'll hire anybody. But that's kind of, that's my connection in SASE. I go to that conference. I don't go to other conferences. People have asked me to do other, I do lots of interviews, but not at conferences, right? So when we bring them in, I do a lot of that. So those folks that I tracked in, they hire on, and then I continue to mentor them, and I make sure that, they have sponsorship even within the company. That's how I think that I try to be successful with the mentoring relationships. The other thing that I always do when I get into a mentor relationship is people need to understand what a mentor is, right? In a circle. So we have a lot of interns now. So I tell the interns, every single person that you meet, they're in evaluative mode. They're going to evaluate you because they need to understand, should I be hiring this person for full-time, or I should be providing them a return internship offer depending upon the year. And those set of criteria are different. So I tell them that. But then when I mentor them, I tell them our relationship is fully confidential. Anything that we have a conversation on stays within us. Everything that I get will never get into a write-up for you. That develops trust, right? And all the Asian Pacific Americans, the APAs, all the engineers within my engineering group. So I mentor all three of them, and I tell them exactly that. I have an intern working in my group. So unfortunately for her, I tell her right up front that it's my job to evaluate you. But I say that, I don't do it unfairly, and I'm going to tell you upfront what it is that's going on. So there's a couple of things that I think are keys to mentoring. You need to care, and you need to set up a relationship that is trusting. And saying that it's a confidential environment, and nothing that we say ever goes to anybody that will evaluate you are kind of two elements that I have that deal with setting up a mentorship.
Gotcha. When you were going through your career and stuff like that, did you like seek out different mentors within P&G, I guess, or other groups? Because I know you're a mentor for a lot of people now, but I'm wondering like if you had like past experiences where you had like good or even, I guess, not as good mentors, because sometimes it is hard to find a good fit for some people depending on what they want to do, right? Or what they're looking for.
Right. So I utilize mentors, yes. The funny thing is I am much more comfortable on this side of the mentoring table, being the mentor. I don't get mentored that often. Usually what I do is I'm very, very comfortable with using my peers as sounding boards. So I do that all the time. So we're in a director meeting, and I'll Teams chat somebody, say, hey, did you catch that? And then that's how, there's some the mentoring. So I usually I'm most comfortable with peer mentoring because I think that's honest, open kind of an exchange.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I'm starting to realize that I appreciate like peer mentoring a lot more, at least in my first few years out of college. I think something that my boss had told me more so was those, or I guess like earlier on, like in college, the idea of like connecting with some of the higher ups or really finding a mentor who's really far in their career, but she stressed more so of like lateral connections, and those people will grow in their career kind of the same time as you. And they're also going to be really upfront with you, I think, because there isn't that kind of divide. So I think I definitely learned that in my first few years, and trying to utilize that the most that I can going to the office now or just connecting with other teams in my department. But one thing I was curious about, I know we talked a little bit about like being a younger professional, but is there anything that you kind of miss about that time of like kind of being in the beginning of your career and kind of learning everything at the start of your time at P&G?
So I like to think that I'm always at the beginning of something. So even now, I continue to learn. The things that I continue to learn now is how to manage upper management, right? There's lots of expectations. Whenever there's a line of questioning, that's when you think something's, you get a sense, and that sense is they're asking something weird, and I have to stop and listen to figure out where they're really coming from. So I would probably say if something doesn't feel normal, then you should stop and pay attention as to what it is that's being asked. Is a kind of hint that I would have.
Yeah, relating to like what Jason said about like also talking with people on the same level, and in general, I guess being open to asking questions and not, I guess like not being too afraid that you sound dumb. I've heard that a lot too, where everyone's like, it's okay to ask questions, because I found that when you enter in, especially a bigger company, there's just ways that they might be doing things, and some people are just like, oh, okay, like if that's the way we're doing it, but we should be questioning why those things are being done that way, or not be afraid to ask like, oh, what is this acronym? There's a lot of acronyms, I feel like, in different organizations. But yeah, I definitely agree to a lot of that. I guess for me, I'm also curious about like, because your career at P&G has been really long as well. So like what motivated you to stay at this company for such a long time? And did you ever consider, going to a different industry? Because I know P&G is very large in itself, that they make a lot of different products, have a lot of divisions. But was there ever some time that you were like, oh, maybe I would want to switch, like not commercial, but something else?
So you almost leaving me a two-part question. So let me do one at a time.
Okay.
So the first one that I want to talk to, and here's a topic that I would love to get into a little bit, is you asked a question about the way you stated it is, people say you can ask anything you want. That almost sounds like a question, right? Is it okay to ask anything I want? Right, is the way that I'm also reading the way that you stated that. So that was one question, and then there's the why I say at P&G. So let me take the first one.
Okay.
There's a model that we use at Procter & Gamble that we use with that is very applicable to many situations, and that model is PI. PI is a performance image exposure. It's a Procter & Gamble model, and so the entry of coming in the door is performance. You have to perform, period. So whether you're individual contributor, you're influence by authority, or you're direct manager, you have to perform, right? You have to hit those standards or exceed them. And then there is the image. Do you have the image that you're actually performing and exceeding expectations, right? So your image is I'm a talented, resourceful engineer that has excellent problem-solving skills. I can troubleshoot something, and I can come up with the right technical solution that ties into contributing to the business, right? So there's an image that and a brand that's all of us, right? Larry has a brand, Jenny has a brand, Jason has a brand. So we have a brand in our minds that we need to formulate, impress upon our boss, our peers, our project teammates, right? In order to get I want the image that I'm promotable. I want the image that I deserve an increase, that I work and I'm contributing to the business, right? So we need to identify what that image is. We need to work on that image, and then we need to actively manage it in all those people's minds that matter. So the E is exposure. So exposure is something that we actively need to work. So our interns, our summer interns, for example, today had midpoint presentations. That's an exposure point. I reviewed multiple times the slide deck with these 4 interns and made sure that from an exposure perspective, they were taking advantage of this exposure point, right? So when you talk about, you can ask any question that you want. I think you always have to gauge, is it within my image to ask that question? Right. So and with a mentor, that's where you have that trusted relationship, and you can ask anything you want. With a direct manager who evaluates you, I always think twice about how I ask a question, because you're always evaluated. So that's a huge deal. Peers will judge you, but you can be freer with peers, because you're at that working level that you're more comfortable. Right. And I'll be very honest with you, when I go into mentoring relationships, I find that's a two-way street. I ask the other person their perspective as well, because it's a trusted conversation. So that was a model, right? That pie model is a model. The other thing that dovetails into is we started talking about mentors and their roles. We talked about direct managers. We should also talk about daily task providers. There's somebody who always says, this is what you need to do today. There is a technical coach who teaches you your craft, your science. There's an industry expert who teaches you about the industry. So all these different folks, right, will fall into these different roles, and we ought to be recognizing how all these people play a part in our career and our lives. That was the first part.
Right. And I think that's a fantastic breakdown, because I think that's in the back of my mind, that is present, because obviously I'm not going to ask in a meeting with like VPs or directors about like, oh, what's this mean? I'll probably ask someone else on the side, probably like someone on my team, just to fill me in if I miss something, right? Because there is that image that you want to basically show to the others. If you've never really interacted with them before, what is your impression, right? So I think that is really important. And I think like unconsciously, I do that within my professional career as well. And I have like those relationships that you've mentioned with like mentors who I can kind of be more trustworthy toward, and then the other peers who I kind of have to be a little careful with at times too. So I definitely agree with that. I guess I never really heard it explicitly set out in like these broken down steps. So I really appreciate that. Thanks, Larry.
No problem. Yeah. And the other thing that I've taken to practice, so Asians aren't known to be very good verbal communicators. Mm-hmm. We are much better in the realm of written, right? So I would probably say that folks, they ought to continue to leverage that written skill as an exposure point and write excellent emails and reports and get your work done there, right? And that's a basis. for folks to advance in the career and become leaders, they need to have a, you can look at what makes a leader, and there's presence, there's charisma, there's all these other things, right? And one of the characteristics that goes along with that is being able to speak, right? So I've taken from one of these keynote speakers, Yul Kwan, amazing. So he said, he's a typical Asian. So he has said, and I follow this rule, within the first 5 minutes of any meeting, he will always say something, whether it's to summarize and agree upon a point of a colleague or come up with his own idea, whatever it is. First 5 minutes, he has a rule. So he says Asians are good at rule following. First 5 minutes, I'm going to speak and I'm going to establish my voice in the room. It's like presence in the basketball court. You got to make your presence known. And that goes along with part of that image.
Oh, I really like that rule and think that I should try to apply that, because I think sometimes, especially my first year of not really knowing much, I feel like I kind of sat back and was trying to just absorb as much as I could and just learn a lot. And like Jenny's saying, like I don't really want to ask questions that seem maybe like common knowledge in our fields, but just trying to establish myself early on, I feel like that makes, or is very impressionable too. And I agree too. I think like the nice thing, or at least why I was a part of SASE, was to address that kind of weakness in me of that verbal communication and that ability to just speak in public spaces and in the workspace. I think with the podcast here or even networking events, it's just a good way to continue practicing. And it's still like a long journey, but I could definitely see that in myself. That's like the big weakness that I see in my career that I want to continue working on. One thing that you did mention that I thought was pretty interesting though, with this like performance and image thing, it kind of reminded me of this idea of just the imposter syndrome. And it kind of seems like when there's a disconnect between like your performance and your image, right? Like you might still be a high performer, but your self-image or your self-confidence of your ability to do and kind of like fill out those tasks might be kind of different. So I was wondering if you had experienced imposter syndrome and how, or maybe even if you've seen it more so in maybe your or your interns, and what your advice would be to kind of break that mindset.
Imposter syndrome. That's a very interesting concept. So imposter syndrome is generally speaking when you move into a new job and you're learning and you don't know what you're doing, right? So I think it's an absolute fair phenomena. I think that the way that you get over it is continue to make sure that you hear and understand the expectations of the direct manager. So be very, very clear and overt and say, this is what I heard the work statement is, and this is when I'm going to get it back to you. And then you come back and you say, this is what I've accomplished, and then my next steps on this is this, right? So just those little milestones are going to, and obviously it's with the supervisor, so that you get that validation. So you get these validations, and also what you're doing is you're working the pie, right? So you're getting expectations, you're hitting it, coming back and making sure that you claim success on these small victories. So that is a way that we manage our interns. We're very, very explicit in regards to the deliverables. There's a total goal, but to help them get there, that we break it way down into chunks. And we have really, really excellent. This crop is an extremely high caliber one. So I feel kind of bad in writing it in those small chunks, because they would have got it anyway. But their kind of feedback and that kind of interaction, they kind of feed off of each other. And it's like, okay, here's an expectation, I got it. Here's an expectation, got it. That I think is a way of managing imposter syndrome.
I guess I'll circle back to that question, the second part of my question about why you stayed at P&G for as long as you have, and what's keeping I guess you there?
Sure. So my job is never the same every day. Every single day, it's always different. We have some extremely challenging technology. So in blades, we actually vacuum sputter is one of the proprietary things that we do, and it's very high tech. It's a clean room. The blades need to be clean. They're etched, and then they bombard it with hard metals. So that technology is very, very cool. Our high speed, high quality sharpening is a competitive advantage because we can do it at high speed, high quality, low cost. And that's one of those high proprietary things that we don't give up. So those technical challenges I have, and I'm challenged with. So there's technology challenge, there's business challenges. The strategy associated with integrating the technology, and I have to do it at the right capital cost, and at the right timing. These business imperatives are very strategic, and they challenge me with solving these kinds of problems, right? So they're complex. It's not just, here's a drawing that you have to deliver. It's they're always complex problems that's appropriate at my level. So it's never the same. And the other thing that keeps me here is the culture. So the equity and inclusion is no joke. We are very, very, very serious about it. It's very fortunate that I get paid to care about people, right? So SASE is fully funded. The company fully pays for when I go and they actually pay SASE as well. We sponsor SASE for events, Northeast Regional Conference, National Conference, etc. Our VP is Serenivis, is is on the board. He may even be the president. So it's highly supported, and that amount of caring really shows. It's part of social values that I really believe in. And then on a more practical matter, there is a exercise that I would encourage you to go through, and it's called a career bullseye. And this career bullseye exercise, what it does is it really establishes and has you become self-aware of what is it that interests and drives you as a person. So when I go through this, I find that stability is very important to me. Why is stability in job stability important to me? I have 2 sons, a family, and a mortgage, and both at this point in time, both my sons, one is graduated, one is a freshman. They will leave college with no student loans, and Procter & Gamble may not have paid me the most glamorous salary, but from a career perspective and a living perspective, it is stable, and my family is going to be absolutely fine. They'll have no college, unless they go to grad school. They'll have no college undergrad debt, and that's important.
Oh, that's incredible. And yeah, I just want to thank you for kind of sharing what kept you there. I think for Jenny and I, we've talked a lot about kind of how we feel about our current companies, and I think sometimes it could definitely feel a little daunting to think that far ahead in your career. And it's a nice perspective to hear from someone who's been at a company and has seen a focus on like diversity and inclusion and has supported you throughout all these years. I think you kind of had a good segue to talking about your family. I know here at the adult table, we like to focus on professionalism, but also kind of your life outside of it and kind of how you balance all of that stuff. So a topic that we like to talk about a lot about is like work-life balance. And we're wondering kind of what your thoughts are on it, being a father, having a family, and how that has kind of changed throughout your career.
So what's very cool at this point in time is that we are just about empty nesters. So the older one had his birthday So he's 24 on the 24th. So he had his golden
His
birthday.
golden year. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. He was in Dominican Republic. So he's graduated, working, flew the coop as soon as he could, really wanted his independence. So he's out, right? So we tempt him by coming home to, we tempt him with food at home. So he does that. And the younger one is finished his freshman year in college. He's doing fine. So we're, in the not distant future, we will retire. So how has that changed over the years, right? So when I was an initiative manager, I killed myself. I worked 80, 90 hours. It was required in order to deliver the programs that I was on. It was a crucible role. So you launch a career like that. I was very, very fortunate that I had the in-laws nearby. So family matters, right? It takes a village. So I was really fortunate, and unfortunately, we took advantage of it more than I should have. So they watched in turn the older son during preschool, and then he went to public school, and then he the in-laws picked up the for preschool kind of pick up and drop off. So they covered both sons over a span of like 9 years because that's how it worked out. So that was huge cost savings. And that's one way that we managed it. So the family is part of work-life balance. So I spent a lot of time with my wife. She likes to work out at the YMCA, so that's what I did earlier today. We have a schedule. So from a work-life balance perspective, I spend time with it, and that's what she likes to do, and I'm happy to do it, and it's fun. But from a work-life balance perspective, I also have big hobbies. So my big hobbies are my martial arts practice. That is a huge part of who I am, of what I do. I've studied for over 20 years. Started with Taekwondo. Now it's about 12, 13 years in a Chinese martial art, Kung Fu. It helps me in so many different ways. So Jason, you talked about how it's hard to present, right? I still get always nervous when I have a presentation going on. I sweat it, and I compete and demonstrate in martial arts intentionally just for practice, because I say, if I can do this, I can do that. There are transferable skills.
Wow, interesting. Is that kind of the reason why you picked it up? You mentioned to just be able to do and practice that skill.
For me, Kung Fu and martial arts is mastery of the body and the mind and the spirit. So I'm very interested in never falling down when I'm old. I think I'm pretty well on my way for that. I think that, so I've had knee things go on and I have to do things, but martial arts is a way of continuous improvement. And it's funny. So I have three black belts across the two arts, right? And I'm very fortunate in that in the Chinese Kung Fu, I'm not Sifu level. However, our Sifu has asked 9 of us to be disciples, and disciples are the inner circle. And inner circle, we're taught more so that we can preserve the art, because Chinese Kung Fu is a dying art. It's not as popular as Taekwondo or MMA. So we're to learn it, preserve it, promote it. So I teach, right? And here I am teaching, and I'm supposed to know what I'm doing, and I teach. And then I go into class, and I'm humbled. And he says, "You're doing this wrong. The structure's wrong, and the body mechanics and the interrelationship with who I am, which is I'm a mechanical engineer. There's structures that he talks about, and that's why I really follow and appreciate the Sifu, because he was an engineer. He studied as an engineer, and what he talks about are structures, bridges, triangles, circles, and that body shape is integral to being safe, being strong. So as I fall or as I do things, those structures will keep me safe.
Oh, that's really cool. Damn. I feel like I want to also do something that also is like not work related as a hobby, and be super involved in that community, and but also something in my culture as well. I think that that's really awesome. That I actually picked up paddling for dragon boat recently. I think that's really cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's really fun because it's like it forces me to also exercise as well, but I really enjoy the team aspect of it as well, in the community that comes along with it. So I did miss that, especially moving to like a new area. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. My parents were like, wow, you're doing something Chinese.
and the family that you pick up from there is absolutely amazing, right? So my kung fu family, we get together for Father's Day, and
Yeah.
we travel competition, we travel together, and we have meals together, and there's a solidarity that we cheer each other on when we're competing. So it's a family.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And then another thing I wanted to touch upon was, I know in the beginning we were talking about the adult table and what is considered a quote unquote adult, and if you consider yourself an adult. I guess I kind of just want to go into that and like talk about how you could, like, if you consider yourself having like child at heart, being a child at heart, and like your definition of adulthood. Because from my experience as well, and even with talking with other previous podcast guests, it's very gradual. It seems like a shift of mentality for a lot of people in like different aspects of their life, whether that is when they buy a house or something, or when they have a family. Those are like kind of the steps, or like kind of things that like move you along that path. But I'm kind of curious as to what your mindset is on that, and like your definition of adulthood and where you are now.
So I would say the definition of adulthood is the largest things are family obligations, financial obligations. I think those are really the two biggest pieces, right? So everything kind of flows from there. So I get married, I have kids. Those are large responsibilities that are from a financial perspective humongo. So when I think about adulting, I think about how do you become independent, right? So how do you become independent in regards to financial, right? So how do you get to that point? When I was an undergrad, so there's multiple things that financial goals that need to be set even before you get married. So the first thing that I impart on people coming on and becoming full-time in our company is they have to invest and pay themselves in their retirement. That's the first and foremost thing that they have to do. That's the first. Well, there's you have to have enough money to live, and then once you take care of those basic needs, then you have to pay yourself, and you have to pay down your and start funding your retirement. That's the first thing you have to do as soon as possible, right? And so I've tried to teach my kids that. So that's the first thing you do, and then as I think the stages of adulting is dedicated, and you have a steady companionship. So I get married, and then kids come along, and then that's another relationship kind of a thing. So relationships are a huge thing, and then houses are another thing, and then saving for student loans for the kids is another thing.
Right.
So there's a concept that and you have probably heard this concept, right? When we talk about paying for your retirement, there's a concept called FU money, right? What is that money that you need as a nest egg in order to look at the situation and say, FU, this is not working for me, and I'm moving, right, to something else. So if you look it up, there's many ways of calculating walkaway money, and it really deals with at what point in time can you actually hit that and say, I have enough walkaway money that it tick me off, and I have the power. So there's a total mental power that goes along with being able to walk away. So those are the various stages, I think, of adulting. Now, the reason I say that I am young at heart is I like to mess around. I like to play around, and I do that in my sports. I do that in my interactions. So I like to be a wise guy, and that's how I stay young at heart.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Because I I feel like I haven't been working. I haven't even been like quote unquote adulting that long, but I think I just become a bit jaded. And so I think it's very like nice, I guess, to hear that I can still I don't know. It's a mindset thing too, right? It's like figuring out, and I haven't even progressed to any of the steps that you've mentioned, by the way. Still very early on.
Okay, we have to have a chat. If you're not paying, if you're not doing 401k.
Oh no,
right?
I am doing that. I am, but
Good,
not like
good,
the other
good.
steps, like of marriage. I was
No,
speaking.
you don't have to do
Oh,
that. That's not it. That's
right, or like a house. Or, yeah, I have the 401k and that stuff down.
You got to do
figuring that out.
You got to do the 401k. You got to do the Roth IRA. You got to. You have to do a bunch of those things. That's the bare minimum. You got to pound that money in now.
Yeah.
Time value money. You got to do it now.
Yes. So I have those figured out. I think of just learning more about financial literacy and understanding the market, and that sort of thing is like kind of the big learning curve that I feel like a lot of people in our generation are figuring out, because we just never were really taught like the terminology for like market and the jargon, all that sort of thing. So, but I do have that. Okay. Financial independence, like, yes. But I was, I guess for other aspects. Yeah.
Yeah. I think like every time that we have like our team meetings and stuff, and we're just kind of talking through like our day to day, it really does come back down to like finances and stuff, because I think Jenny and I are also both in the mindset of the like work hard, play hard mentality too, and like enjoying that stuff. So having a balance of really being cognizant of our future, but also enjoying like the money we are earning at that time. But yeah, I was also wondering too, like, what do you think surprised you the most being a husband and like a father too? I know you talk a lot about like your family and how important it is to you, but I think that's also a stage that, like Jenny said, that we are definitely not there at that point, but always curious to kind of hear more in that perspective.
So what surprised me about being a husband and a father, what surprised me is how hard work it is. And how the ups and downs can absolutely be that, and you so look forward to the rewards. And even now my sons will hopefully don't hear this podcast. They still hug me, right? And even during text, I'll say, on my older son's birthday, said happy birthday, love you, and even in text he'll actually say it back, right? So, and that's very different than my parents, right? Different generation. So, what surprised me is how hard work it is. Sometimes you are ticked off because of whatever it is that's going on, but at the kind of the end of the day, at the stage that we're in, it's really the hugs and the love yous that really are very rewarding, and it's worth it.
No, I find it interesting because I feel like that relationship of like showing love verbally and physically too is like maybe not super common in a lot of like Asian culture or Asian people, maybe. But I do find it interesting that in talking with my friends and even from like my parents' perspective, that they've kind of like turned kind of 180 from what they noticed in like their relationship with their families. So whether they like didn't recognize something when they were growing up and flipping it around and making sure that like us as kids have that same or are fulfilled in that way that they may have missed growing up. So I think it's really interesting that you pointed that out. I know we're kind of like wrapping up in time, but we would like to do kind of a quick rapid fire round for you. Just kind of quick questions, quick answers kind of things, just random topics as we go. I know we didn't send you the exact questions for this stuff, but if you're open for it, we have a couple of just quick questions for you.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.
So what is a financial guilty pleasure for you?
I play an iPad game that is a guilty pleasure.
Okay.
Okay.
What is the game?
Empires and Puzzles.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
What's your favorite cultural food?
Cultural.
Or I guess any food.
So I'm gonna tell you that I'm an avid cook. So as we talk about adulthood, right? I think that finding independence in multiple ways, my finding being able to cook as an independence kind of a thing it makes me an adult. So that's for me, that's a sign of adulthood because I can cook and I can feed myself. So, you know, and I have all kinds of tools. I have smokers, so I'm a decent cook. But there's one thing that frustrated the heck out of me, and I could not get, Jason, Jenny, I could not get this. I could not get a tender beef stir fry, right? I would make it and the beef would be tight. So I got a book from Kenji, right? Is the cookbook, Kenji Lopez. And he described his whole process and uses baking soda, and it's alkaline, and that alkaline interferes with the protein, and then when you cook it doesn't squeeze out the like. I made it tonight. It was good.
Oh, shoot, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So that's my favorite cultural food right now, and that's a black bean oyster sauce stir fried beef.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Oh, I love that.
My list would go on, but sorry, that wasn't as quick as you wanted it to be. Probably.
No, that's great. No, that's a great backstory. So that's your favorite food right now. Is there one that you also really like cooking?
Oh, so here are the things how I arrive at that I like to cook. The things that my family that brings them together are the items that I like to cook. So Saturday I made reverse seared steaks. My younger son kills for them, right? Whatever he's doing, he will make time to come home for that, right? Have you heard of reverse seared steaks?
I have not.
Okay, so you can look it up, but the end intent is that the gradient is all medium rare, and then just the outside is seared. So if you look up the method, it'll tell you how to actually go ahead and do it. It deals with cooking it slow and low temperature, as opposed to like searing it really, really hot, and you get this awful gradient, and you only get like a little thin middle of medium rare, and everything's like a gray up to there. So if you look it up, and you can ask me questions later. And I do a gorgonzola compound butter, but that is something that the kids when I ask them, what do you want for your birthday? The younger one will always say reverse seared steak. The 24, he's having lobsters, but he's having 3 lobsters this Saturday.
Every time I go home, I ask for seafood.
Excellent.
Because I never buy it myself. I'm like, it's too expensive. But if you're buying, I will eat it.
Yeah. So that's how I figure out what it is that I like to cook. So 4th of July, he's gonna have buddies over. I'm probably gonna smoke ribs because my ribs are pretty good.
Wow. I gotta come over to your house.
Not everything.
Come on down. We'll have a party.
So I know you mentioned retirement. What is one thing that you would want to do, or what is the first thing that you would do once you retire?
So, oh my goodness, I am so dying to go to Asia. So Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Thailand. We have not. I've been to Hong Kong, and that's really it. So I'm really dying to do those things. So a lot of travel. I would love to convince my wife to live months, like 3 months in like Thailand. It's really cheap, or Vietnam, right? I like to think you're gonna actually save money, but I'm not sure the way that we eat yet we'd actually save money.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you save money to spend all of it on food. That's how I kind of take all my vacations.
And that's
the dollar
okay.
does. Yeah.
I'll take a Spirit flight, but then I'll get a nice meal. You know, it's a balance.
Right. Do you have a least favorite chore?
Mowing the lawn is my least favorite chore. This is my excuse. I'm sustainable in that I never water the lawn because I think it's a waste, and it's weeds, and you know, you mow it, you only keep down the weeds.
Right.
That's true. Fair. That's fair.
But from a chore perspective, this house is quite equitable, meaning that I run my own laundry. Most of the time I run my wife's laundry. I'm the primary cook, clean plenty. So we split very, very equitably.
Well, great. Well, thanks again for doing the rapid fire questions. We do have another one last thing that we like to do on our episodes. We like to ask our guests this one question in the theme of our podcast. So, what is one adult thing you wish you had known sooner?
So when I look back at my career, and a sliding door would be the value skill of networking. So networking I equated as politics as kind of sucking up, right? So the value of that is very, very, very high, and that skill is something that I'm continuing to work on. It is very easy for folks to have level phobia. So when there's a leader, right, you know, one level up, it's like, oh, I can't talk to them, they're too important. No, so there's many other minority groups have figured that out, right? We need to step up and go ahead and address that. So I think SASE is an amazing way of in a safe place, going ahead and practicing those networking skills. And I wish that I had SASE as I was growing up in my career.
Yeah, that's true. I think that was also me too when I was in college, and still a little bit now. Whenever I'm talking to any higher ups, I'm like, oh, why would they want to talk to me? But I think it's more important just to put yourself out there in certain situations, like whether it be a networking event, then you might as well, try to create that connection. I'm trying to apply that more now, generally in my professional life. So thank you for that, Larry.
It's a practice skill, and
yeah, for sure.
It's a necessary thing that we need to do. So we may as well figure out how to actually enjoy it.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, for sure.
I feel like I've never regretted approaching someone. Like, I am definitely hesitant a lot of times, and I'll more so regret myself being scared of that moment versus just going up. Normally it's not too bad. Even if it is too bad, it's a good, I don't know, to be a cliche, a learning experience, a good story to come out of it, that something to build upon after. So I never feel bad about it. It's just like that anticipation part. So just a good reminder to keep pushing for that.
I just want to say thank you again, Larry, for coming on the Adult Table. We're really glad to have you on our podcast. Really great to see a familiar face from, all the in-person events that we've had with you in the past. And I'm sure I'll see you at more conferences as well. And to the listeners, if you see Larry, he's always open to help out. I think that's what makes him, he's very approachable. So feel free to ask him any questions. But if the listeners have any follow-ups or anything, do you have any social media or I guess email or contact information that they can contact you at if they want to?
Sure, they can contact me at my work email, and that's chan.l.7@pg.com.
Awesome. And for everyone else, don't forget to subscribe so you know when episodes come out, and follow us on our Instagram at the Adult Table Podcast for updates. I'm Jason Chin.
And I'm Jenny Chung. And we'll see you next time at the Adult Table. Thanks for listening.